Hi everyone, we're here this week with very special guest Ed Brisson, who was a writer in the recent New Mutants run, just before Vita Ayala took over a little bit ago, and Extermination, X-Force for a while, Age of X-Men, NextGen, and Old Man Logan and Dead Man Logan between a lot of other stuff, including Absolute Carnage and a lot of other things that are just overall pretty cool. And we're gonna make some questions about all his sex stuff, and anyone can leave whatever they want in the comments. And yes, I guess that's it for the beginning. If you all want to say anything more before we roll it.
I'm good. Let's roll.
Okay, let's roll.
This week on Mutant Watch.
Right back. Okay, so I guess for beginning in some place, well, I think the first X stuff you wrote about is actually Old Man Logan, could be?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. Old Man Logan was the first, I think it was only my third book at Marvel was Old Man Logan. So I started that 2017, I believe. So yeah, that's where I started. Being a Canadian, I'm a huge Wolverine fan by default, and so it was a pretty exciting thing to take over. Nerve-wracking to take over because before that had been Mark Millar, Bendis, and then Jeff Lemire writing it. So there were some pretty big shoes to fill. But I'm a huge Wolverine fan, and doing sort of an older, cantankerous Wolverine was just a ton of fun.
I know Kobe is like a big fan of that one, so I'm gonna let Kobe take that first one, and we can roll with the other stuff you did afterwards.
Sure.
Yeah, great. Yeah, try not to fanboy too much because I just adored that series. I thought that was one of the best things going at the time. Wanted to thank you because I was the reviewer on Dead Man Logan. I don't know if you had anything to do with it, but in the solicits for Dead Man Logan as it went through, there was always a Comic Watch quote, and I really thought that was cool.
Yeah, I didn't come from me. I'm pretty big. I tend not to read any reviews when I'm writing stuff, which I don't know if that's good or bad, but it's just I tend to get inside my own head too much if I start reading reviews. But I think you mentioned it on Twitter, and I do remember that coming up. So. But that was probably the editors who handled that.
Right on. Well, so I kind of wanted to get into your head about how you got into his head. Because you've lived with Old Man Logan for years, right? You got to take him on his farewell tour. And it's kind of a controversial character. Some people loved it. Some people hated it. So I just wanted to kind of see, what was going through your mind as you're creating, a whole new chapter and a final chapter of this mythos.
So with Old Man Logan, obviously, I sort of had picked up from what other people had done with the character beforehand. Like Jeff Lemire had written the first 25 issues, and obviously Mark Millar and Bendis. But I don't know. Wolverine is one of those things where it was just easy to slip into, because I've been reading Wolverine for 30 plus years. I'm such a huge fan of the character. I think that there's a lot of the sort of family stuff that speaks pretty dearly to me, and that I have close to me. That there's just gave you a lot of meat and a lot of stuff to sort of pull on in terms of story. And I think Wolverine's he's a dick, but he's also he's a very caring person. He's much more nurturing, I think, than people tend to realize. He's always taking others under his wing, and I think there's something about that was just easy for me to slip into. We got someone else here.
Hello.
Yes, here's Nick.
Hey, how you doing?
Doing good.
Yeah,
Thanks
I mean,
for joining. This is
as
super
you're talking-
exciting.
Yeah,
No
we're
problem.
super excited.
Like as you're talking about this nurturing side of him, like that comes out so huge with his relationship with Glob. And I know Glob is a personal favorite of yours.
Right.
But that relationship reminded me a lot of like when I was growing up, it was Wolverine and Jubilee.
hmm
But can talk a little bit about I guess Glob really like
Well, so yeah, I'm a huge fan of Glob. I think one of the things in my own life and in my family, there's a lot of people who deal with anxiety, and Glob is a perfect sort of character to work through a lot of that anxiety with, because he himself, at least the way when I started writing him, is just a very anxious person, is dealing with a lot of those issues. So in that term, he was a lot, in a lot of ways, a way for me to sort of voice a lot of my own anxieties and work through some of the stuff from my own past. And I find that like him and Wolverine together, Wolverine is very confident, and whereas Glob is not. And I think they just balance off each other quite well for those, because of those characteristics in both of them. That makes sense, sort of like
yeah, totally,
All
absolutely. Like, and, I mean, you can feel that anxiety in Glob with the way you write. Who do we have to talk to? Like, do we have to talk to Jordan? What do we have to do to get you a solo Glob book?
I don't know. I just what you need to do this. So if all four of you would each agree to buy 15,000 copies of each issue, I think we can do it. So if you each have about $45,000 a month laying around,
My comic shop's gonna love me.
I might have
Yeah.
to move some stuff around, but we'll see.
right? Yeah, I don't know. Like, I as much as I love Glob, I don't know that there's many people clamoring for a Glob ongoing. I would love to do a Glob one shot at one point, or a Glob mini. I think NextGen was the closest I got to. I tried to make that a very Glob centric story, and I think it's the closest I ever got to, and probably the closest we'll ever get to having a Glob series. And I think Glob largely works if he has other people around him as well. He's not. I don't know that he's someone that could just carry something by himself.
Talking about NextGen, now that you brought up, that's one of my faves from you. Like, and especially because this perspective of Glob, what you talk about the anxieties, he's someone that is the only person in the book that really knows what happened before all the setup, the fates of X-Men, and etc. And for me, like, it's something that I see a lot. I think I see a lot in your writing, where you think about who a character is and what they would feel like or would want. I feel this way too about Keith Cable, and his role in Extermination is something like, what would this character want, or what would they feel in this situation, and roll with it. Like, I feel like in other books I read more like there's world building and then the characters react to it, but in both NextGen and in Extermination and other stories, I feel like it's more like how these characters feel, what they would do with their feels, and then the story unfolds onto that. And in NextGen, I like this a lot, both in Glob and in Armor and all. I feel like these three characters that were touching into this tension on how they feel within this world, and how, this world is not very done for either Armor or Null for the way of being or of expressing, more like not within the constraints that it had. And I thought it was brilliant to put Glove as someone that knows everything, and that, that anxiety. I know with what everything of this is about, but nobody else does. So how do I deal with that? And I don't know, I wanted to ask you more about that. It was, like, for me, a very great idea.
Oh, thanks a lot. I think that the thing that was exciting for me to do that was with that issue was that, like, not only did Glob was he the only one who didn't know what was going on? The thing that was more interesting to play around with is that, like, when he starts to question his own sanity around it, like maybe if everybody else is saying that this thing is true and it's true, and I'm the one who's wrong. And then obviously we discovered that that's not the case, and he's realizes how to help the other characters see it. But yeah, I think, for me, it's before I came into Marvel, I wrote a lot of crime type stuff, and I wrote a lot of I spent 10 years just doing autobiographical comic strips that I drew as well. So I find that sometimes when I'm writing the bigger things, I struggle with this idea of like world-ending, alien invasion events or whatever they are. I sometimes just really I really struggle with giving a shit, like honestly, about that sort of thing. I really just enjoy much more the personal stakes that people are dealing with. And so, I think with Kid Cable and with Glob, I really try to hone in on that more and make it, like, I'm never sure sometimes if I'm making it just interesting for myself. I'm hoping that other readers are interested in, but that's just the stuff that excites me more. That there's a real, I don't want to say smaller, but the personal stakes, the things that the characters are dealing with and the anguish that they're going through. And I tend to, like I said, I have issues around anxiety, so I tend to like project that a lot on characters, and this is the only way I get interested in this story. I don't care about the latest mothership that's invading our planet.
Yeah, I also deal with anxiety a lot, and I feel like it really, at least in NextGen, it really projects into the characters. Like, I really could feel like, oh, this thing where you don't know exactly what you're worried about or what you know about it is really well done a lot of times with this guy. And I thought the choice of characters was really great, because like Armor and Unknown feel like this kind of people that would really get anxious in that situation. In the situations with the half truths and the
right.
Yeah, all that stuff.
Yeah, and both those characters, Armor and Anole, I like a lot. Armor, I always just like, and I was trying to push there, and my time writing the X-Men, I always think that she should just have, she feels like a character that needs a larger role than what she has a lot of the times. And so that's, when we did the Uncanny X-Men and we had the younger team, which was very similar to the team we had for NextGen, which weirdly, now I'm thinking about it, I don't know why I don't use Shark Girl on those teams, because I love that character, and I can't remember why she wasn't more there more often. Yeah, so Armor, during that, I wanted to have her take charge a bit more. And same with our X-Men run, just because that character feels like a leadership character who hasn't had that opportunity to be that character yet.
I'm with Duna. I really appreciated the use of the characters that you chose, particularly Armor, since you were dealing with the younger X-Men, and Armor is one that we don't see interact with the younger X-Men as much, because while they were off doing their thing in Academy X and New X-Men, she was an official X-Men before any of these characters. So it makes sense for her to step up in that leadership role, because she has that experience. She's fought alongside Wolverine and Cyclops and Emma Frost, wherein these others, they fought on their own, but they don't have that knowledge that she has. And your use of her really kind of played into that.
Well, thanks a lot. That's actually, I've made exactly that argument in the writer's room before, so I'm glad you picked up on it, and others feel the same way, because, yeah, she's definitely, I think going forward, I think some other writers are starting to have similar ideas. So hopefully we'll see more of that from Armor in the future.
So since you brought up Uncanny X-Men, and you did that with Matthew Rosenberg and Kelly Thompson in that kind of 3-person writing stuff, I want to ask you how it is to like tie up so much continuity stuff into it. Like it's not difficult, because like, for example, in Extermination, which is also one of my faves from you, I love these issues, and I mostly love them because there was a lot of mess up stuff going on before them with the original 5, and how you're gonna like unfold this situation, and it tied up together very well. And it wasn't like forced. It wasn't like it tied up together because it had to be tied up or something like that. It was more like this character, Kid Cable, came with a certain, like, like in his mind, that's what he had to do, and that made sense with the character. So it wasn't like, it was not like just a device or something. It was something that made sense emotionally. And I don't know. I want to ask you how it is to tie up all this like big not stuff into something till you arrive.
It's a nightmare, but it was fun. I think the one, when I was given the assignment to do Extermination, that story that we did there actually originally started as a story I was going to do in Old Man Logan, involving a lot of time displaced characters, or dimensionally displaced characters. And it was something that when they were, Marvel was looking for a way to put the original 5 X-Men back into, I guess, their continuity, their timeline. And so I had mentioned this, and one of the things I liked, and one of the things that was the most divisive thing when I talked about it in the room, and also when it came out on Twitter, was the idea of, and this is a spoiler for anyone who's not read the first issue of Extermination, but this idea of this younger Cable killing the older Cable and taking over the position. Because I think the one thing that always sort of stuck with me with the younger 5 being in our timeline was that Cable's job is to police the timeline, and he's just left them to run about. But I think you can rationalize that because there is no Cyclops. Cyclops is dead, but with the younger Cyclops, Cable has his dad back, right? And so that's an easy rationalization for why I think Cable would have just not sent them back, because anyone who's lost a father would welcome that opportunity to have more time with their father, even if it's a different version of the father from that they've known. But I like the idea that Cable is sort of like the grizzled war vet, and Kid Cable, when I brought him in, what I really wanted was that I don't know if anyone has gone to the military or knows folks who've gone into the military, but you get that first year Marine or cadet mentality, which is very black and white. It's very right and wrong, and it's very I don't want to say it's not nuanced, but it's very much like that that they sort of figured it out, and they realize they're willing to take chances to set things right that other people aren't. And I think that's the thing I liked about Kid Cable, is he's got that very much black and white. These kids need to go back, and it's going to happen. And I like the idea that he knows he's supposed to maintain the timeline, and if his older version can't do it anymore, then he's not killing Cable by taking out the older version, because he's still Cable. So it's this weird cyclical thing. But anyway, I like this idea of him coming in and trying to clean it up, and I really wanted to do it in a way that paid respect to how Brian Michael Bendis and Stuart Immonen had set up bringing the original 5 into our current timeline. And there was a lot of stuff. It was a lot of juggling, a lot of figuring things out, and I think it took months of just sitting down and trying to figure out how it all works. But yeah, I was really happy with how it came out, and I think the end, it just tied everything back to the original pretty cleanly. And it, we intentionally left the end a little bit, with Rachel being dragged off by Ahab. I know I got a lot of heat online about why everyone was just like, oh, I guess she's gone, but we were intentionally setting up X-Force, which is coming up afterwards. Yeah, it was a cool thing to be part of. It was nice to bring a close to this sort of 5. I don't know, I've been going on 5 or 7 years with Bendis's run, and I'm a huge Brian Michael Bendis fan. So just to be able to work on something that he developed and sort of write the final chapter was just a huge honor. And I think I might have gotten off what the question actually was, but hopefully that sort of answers it.
It's actually really interesting, because I want to follow up a little bit on the like the nightmare scenario talked about in the writing room and kind of making all of this tie in together and making it work within Marvel. What kind of freedom do you have when dealing with these properties and bringing this in while also paying respect to, work that came before, like Bendis and everything? Do you feel like you have a lot of room to navigate those channels, or is it pretty straightforward?
No, there's plenty of room to navigate. Like they gave me lots to do, or lots of room in Extermination. I think the Kid Cable thing was divisive because it was just before Deadpool 2 was coming out. And one of the arguments made in the room was like, look, Cable's going to have a larger sort of, what's the term I'm looking for? Like a larger platform. More people are going to know who Cable was than they did before. And we're literally going to kill him off like 2 months before, 3 months before the movie comes out, which is a valid argument. But I think, if something makes sense in terms of story, they're usually pretty good. It was a weird one in that in the writer's room, where all the editors and writers get together, it was argued back and forth, and we ended up putting it to a vote in the room, which is the first and only time I've seen that happen. Whether or not I could kill Cable and bring in Kid Cable. And I think we won by like 2 votes, like the kill Cable. It was pretty close. And I managed to flip at least one person right at the end to sort of get that, sort of arguing my points. But so there's definitely there's certain parameters you have to play in, and there were certain sort of guidelines I had to meet when doing Extermination. There were certain things that had to have happened by the time it was over. But there was I was given quite a bit of freedom to do a lot of what I thought might be crazier things that I was, that I wanted to do. And again, another spoiler, like at the very end, we bring Cyclops, the adult Cyclops back, but don't explain, we explain it later on how he comes back. But, those were all things that that I had the freedom to kind of do and get away with. So I think Marvel, they're usually pretty good about letting you do things as long as it makes sense to the story and it's a good story coming out of it. I haven't had a whole lot of, there's like 1 or 2 arguments I think that I've lost of things I wanted to do in terms of storytelling, but usually they're pretty supportive of making sure that you're doing the things you want to do.
Yeah, that's actually really cool to know that there was a vote on to decide whether or not to kill Cable. And I gotta ask, was there a plan that would have been enacted if the vote happened where you couldn't kill Cable?
I think it might have ended up just being that Cable was like, I think that they were going to let me get away with Kid Cable. But like originally when I pitched it to the room, I was like, he's 10 with giant guns. Like he's a 10-year-old with these giant guns. And that was an absolute no. But like, what I really wanted to do later, like when I thought about it more afterwards, was like I wanted to tie it more with the Ascani stuff from the 90s and try and make some of that make sense, which is, it's difficult. If you've ever read the Ascani stuff, some of it's great, and then some of it I just don't. It's so hard to follow, and it's just through other writers having worked on it throughout the year. Everyone's got their own take on it. But I think if we hadn't been able to kill Cable, he probably just would have been held captive, throughout the thing. But it made more sense to me that he would be killed and replaced. But that probably would have been my. But I think him being held captive wouldn't have been such a big, like oh shit moment at the end of the issue. So thankfully I won. My side won.
Since we're kind of talking about the writing room and stuff, I want to circle back to NextGen.
Mm-hmm.
Because Age of X-Men, I know it was a very divisive event. Some of the fandom loved it, some of the fandom hated it. I was in the side that loved it. I wanted to know, was it a conscious decision to set each title rooted in specific social institutions? Like, you're dealing with the education system while Vita is dealing with the prison system, and I think it was Leah had law enforcement. Like everybody had their own kind of specific social institution to play in. I just kind of wonder how that all.
I believe that was originally, like in the original document that Lonnie and Zach had put together. I believe that was the case, that it was supposed to be looking at this new society from the perspective of different institutions. And if I'm not mistaken, like I was one of the first to, because I'd just come off Uncanny X-Men, and so I was one of the first to come on board, and I like immediately like leapt onto the education just because like I love those younger X-Men characters. And so, but that was, yeah, it was the plan all along, was that it was different institutions.
I think that's awesome. Like I thought that was a brilliant event. Much props to you guys, especially being an event that, you know, when it's over, we're all getting ready for Hickman. Like we already know Hickman is coming. Hickman is coming. You know, it's like DC when we had Bendis coming, right? So to be able to take that and turn it into something meaningful and worth preserving, I thought was really awesome.
Thanks.
So
it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to write that one.
So, picking up onto some things that we talked earlier, like about armor and the younger generation, etc. I think we can talk about your New Mutants run, which is like divided between the stuff you did with Hickman one issue, and the other stuff that you did by yourself. And I don't know if you want to talk about the creative process of that. I was really glad that you got into some of Armor's past and her parents and a lot of stuff. This was near the end, so anyone that is near the end of your part of it, so if anyone is listening, this probably will have spoilers. But I don't know what was the inspiration for this Nightmare, Mutant, and all that stuff. I have just reread it before the show, and it sucks me every time. It's really chills.
Thanks. I think the I'm trying to remember what the Nightmare thing was. Just like I had an idea. It was through talking to Rod Rice, who was originally going to draw that arc, but was still working on Hickman's. When we're talking in, I think in New York, what was this? Oh God, lost all sense of time. It was New York 2019, I guess, New York Comic Con, and he just wanted to do some sort of weird psychedelic stuff. I'm a huge horror film fan, so I thought it would be kind of fun to do this sort of creature that create this new mutant that creates a nightmare sphere around them. Just optically, there's so much fun stuff to play with. Thankfully we have Flaviano, who does that sort of that art. Like his art in that nightmare sphere is so good, and it was like a little bit of a nod to old New Mutants with the Nightmare Bear stuff and the Demon Bear. Sorry, not Nightmare Bear, Demon Bear stuff. That I enjoyed growing up. Like when I was growing up, New Mutants were sort of my X team for a long time. So I wanted to make a bit of a nod to it, give it that sort of, because like a lot of the old New Mutant stuff was sort of horror, like more than it was adventure. And so just want to do a bit of a nod to that and make it feel like that older stuff. And that's why I kind of, towards the end of my run, we're getting into more like monsters and all that sort of stuff, while also dealing with sort of the like dealing with social media a little bit and all that sort of stuff in there as well. So that's kind of where the inspiration came, just to kind of do nods to the old Sienkiewicz Claremont era of New Mutants.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite ones as well, and Gabriel probably too. We are big New Mutants fans over here, and I can see the inspiration.
Nice.
Another connection that I saw, particularly with that Nightmare arc, I don't know if it was intentional or not, but it definitely reminded me of, and Duna might be able to correct me on the volume, but when the New Mutants got back together and found Legion, that same kind of trippy, almost reality warping experience, it definitely reminded me of that beginning of that run as well.
Sure, yeah, it was a nod to a lot of that stuff, just because like I think the New Mutants do like more weird, trippy stuff than the rest of the X family. So I definitely wanted to play into that a little bit, and wanted to set. I don't know what will happen with that character going forward, since I'm not working on the books anymore. But my hope is that character sort of sticks around for a while, and we get more weird stories around her.
The piece about your New Mutant one that really stuck out to me most, though, was I really enjoyed the journey that Boom Boom was going through, dating back to when you started on X-Force. Tabby has always been a bit of a hot mess character, particularly if you look back and you take into account things like Next Wave and the weird stuff that she's gone into. But I like the way you kind of took her from being such a hot mess, she missed the mission in X-Force, and then take her into New Mutants, where she starts to become a little bit more self-aware and starts making steps to better herself. That arc, I really appreciated and loved where that character is seeming to go now.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, that's she's one of my favorite characters to write. Incredibly cathartic character to write. Like if you're having a really bad day, you just sit down and bang out some Boom Boom dialogue, and it just makes you feel so much better. So yeah, she's just a character that if I could write forever and just put in almost every book, it would be like her and Glob would always be in every book I wrote. But unfortunately, not the reality. But yeah, she's an incredibly fun character to write, and I think, we all screw up and try and get better, and I like that she's a character who can do that and then backslide, and it's still fine. It still fits with the character.
You mentioned that you're not on those books anymore, right? What's next for you? Like where can we find you coming forward?
So right now I'm working on stuff that it just hasn't been announced. It's weird, the COVID and this whole pandemic sort of just threw a grenade into my schedule and messed up a few things. But I am on 2 books right now at Marvel. I had my Ghost Rider King in Black has been announced, and that's coming out. That's a one shot where we kind of tie up some things from the series. I'm working on a book that I'm hoping will be announced in the next month or so, that I'm the 3rd issue in, and I'm having a lot of fun with it. I can't say too much, but it's I can't say anything without spoiling what it is, but it's one that I'm pretty excited about, that Marvel hasn't done before, so this will be exciting. And one book that I'm working on right now is a Marvel property from the 90s that has had some reboots since, and we're doing sort of a mini series later next year that I'm pretty excited about. It might seem like a weird one for me when it actually gets announced, but it's one that I grew up loving, and I'm super excited to get into. Other than that, I'm doing some stuff. A couple other publishers right now, but it's weird because it's just none of it's been announced because everything's been pushed back. But I have a creator own that I believe is coming out in July. I have a new murder book, which I just did a Kickstarter for, which will be a hardcover standalone graphic novel that should be out in June. We're working to get it out in June. And just keep my head down on working on stuff and hoping that that as 2020 rolls, or 2021, Jesus, that there'll be more stuff will be coming to the being announced. But it's so much stuff under wraps. I wish I could talk about more.
Oh, that's cool. Like just the fact that you're busy makes me happy.
Yeah, it makes me happy too. There's a lot of 2020 where that was not the case.
Yes.
So it's good to be back on the horse.
If I don't want to hijack the conversation from Mutant Watch here, but I was such a fan of the Ghost Rider run that you did, and was really bummed that it ended. It felt like it ended short, and I don't know if it was a reception or what was going on, with the whole year that was 2020. And I want to see if you could talk to us a little bit about your work with the Ghost Rider and where we're at with the character now.
So that, it totally got kiboshed because of the pandemic, which a bunch of other books got the same treatment, unfortunately. That was a book that I was really excited 4, and I was hoping that we would have a good long run. I was setting up a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Like we had to, oh God, I guess what did it end at issue 7?
Yeah.
And I think at that point I'd already was writing issue 10. So it was like, it did, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Like, so I didn't say that. But yeah, it was a bit abrupt. It was, because of the pandemic, I think they ended it at a place where some things had been sort of sorted, but, with the King in Black, one shot that's coming up is where we get to tie a lot of stuff up. Yeah, there's a ton of stuff I want to do. I'm a massive Ghost Rider fan from back in the day. So it was a character I lobbied pretty hard to get to write when I found that they were considering to do a Ghost Rider book. So it will probably go down as like so far as one of the biggest sort of professional disappointments that I've ever had, that it just didn't get to go longer. And then we didn't get to do a lot of there's so much stuff that we were going to do that we just never got around to doing. I thought was exciting, but we'll see. Who knows what happens in the future, or these are ideas maybe I can just use elsewhere. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, definitely. There was it was surprising to me, really, because of the push behind Marvel of bringing back the horror side of Marvel Comics, and it was kind of tied into that. And then it feels like, is that something that's still going on right now at Marvel that they're talking about?
I don't know, to be honest. I haven't heard anything, but that doesn't mean that that's not a still push for them. So I'm not sure.
Maybe they just looked at 2020 and said that's enough horror.
Yeah, that was horror show enough for sure.
So I want to get more positive now. So of all the things you have done with X-Men comics, what do you personally like more? What do you personally like or would like people to see more in your comics?
Like, which stuff have I done
that you love more, that you loved more doing?
I think like the stuff that I really like doing Extermination, just because there was a certain amount of excitement around it while I was writing it, and then while it was coming out. I think the one things I think that I had a ton of fun with was the Resurrection of Cyclops as well. It was a X-Men annual that I did where we got to bring Cyclops back, which took me months to write. It was like so much research because I wanted to bring him back in a way that made sense to existing continuity, that it wasn't a thing where we just sort of like sort of did some hand waving sort of magic to bring him back or something like that. So that was a lot of fun because it took a lot of time to figure out, and I was really happy with how it came out. But mostly I think like the thing, I don't know, man, they all have different places in my heart. I really was happy with how Dead Man Logan wrapped up, like the final arc. And I think, I like to think I gave him a great send off. Obviously he died at the end. It's right there in the title. But like that last issue that I wrote was a real emotional one for me to write. I was like tearing up while I was writing it because it was, a lot of like sort of, again, like family stuff that he was dealing with and sort of processing. And he'd gone through this journey and is finally coming home to to be with his family, in death. So that's one that I think I like a lot. NextGen is one that I always wish had gotten more attention because it's just like such fun character stuff that I worked on that I wish that there was more room to do those sort of books that aren't necessarily these world-threatening books, but just kind of like these weird, like kind of slice of life, people trying to survive weird scenarios, but it's mostly just about sort of their relationships with one another and their environment. So yeah, I don't know. Those are the ones. And X-Force was a ton of fun to write as well. And again, tying it back into Extermination and explaining sort of Kid Cable's real motivations and that sort of stuff. And I really like leaning into like the relationship he had in the future with I am blanking on his girlfriend's name. Was it Aaliyah? Yeah. Aaliyah? Thank you. I'm the worst person with names. So yeah, that sort of stuff was, you know, it was just a lot of fun. So I answered your question by basically listing everything I worked on, but
Right.
I mean, she essentially asked you to pick your favorite child. So
yeah.
I'm just mean. So yeah, what we haven't really talked about X-Force a lot. I love a lot X-Force, and I love it more because it tied a lot into a lot of continuity stuff, but I didn't require the reader to read it necessarily. It wasn't like you have to know everything about these characters to just like get into this, but it was more like you were pretty much defining them like in the book a lot. And I feel that that's especially with Boom Boom, with Kid Cable, with Ahab, with Rachel, with all these characters like getting, I don't know, their reasons for doing the things were very powerful in the book. Like I feel like even if you don't know anything about these characters, you're probably gonna enjoy it anyway because like they have a lot of motives and a lot of like background that you brought into that. And I don't know if it was like too much read all the stuff that came before it, or like I don't know how you approach it, like writing these characters that have so much like storyline behind them.
Well, that's kind of like the you know the tightrope you want to walk, I guess, when you're writing that sort of stuff, is you want to make it accessible to new readers while also, you know, paying tribute to the stuff that came before in a way that just doesn't bog down the story. You know, you don't want to gatekeep what people can read. You don't want to make it mandatory that people have, you know, been reading, you know, Marvel comics for as long as I have, or probably most of us on this call have. You want everything to be accessible to someone who just walked in off the street to pick it up and it's just reading NextGen because it had chickens on the cover or whatever, you know, like, so yeah, it's always a fine line to walk, and something you're always sort of cognizant of and trying to ensure that you're satisfying both sides. And the continuity stuff, like the people who've been reading forever, that's actually harder than making it accessible to new readers, because there's so much of it, and so much of it's so twisted at different points when different writers have put their own spin on it, and that it's like hard to figure out what the real continuity is and what's the, you know, in readers' minds. And you know, you can talk to 10 readers and they'll all have different ideas on what the real continuity actually is. So yeah, and then trying to make stuff sense of all the Ascani stuff from back then was, you know, it was fun, but it was, you know, it was a challenge, you know, and so it's just what you got to do, I guess, especially when writing X books, because if you screwed up, man, X Twitter is the loudest segment of Twitter in the world.
That's so true, really, and it's kind of something that I bring up a lot, because I'm not as heavy of an X reader as like Duna and Gabriel, and I know Ross at Comic Watch, huge fan. There's X Twitter is kind of like its own fandom, its own community, even like outside of just Marvel. And there's so many books that are like, this is a great jumping on point, but you get into it and it's really steeped in a lot of lore that's like a great jumping on point if you've read this stuff. Right. And you know, how much of that is going into what's happening with what we see right now in X-Men comics? And do you feel like it's something that they're leaning one way or another too much?
So as far as my involvement up until when I jumped off, it doesn't feel like they're really trying to bog folks down with the, you know, X-Men history. It's a good jumping on point. And I think that people who know the history can get more out of it, but people who don't, who are just coming on there, it's everything that they need is there on the page, and they can enjoy it. I think, you know, if somebody who's coming in, you know, maybe 2 years into Donna X might have to go back and sort of look at where we started, but it was almost like a reset, you know, from past. And yeah, it feels like a good primer where you don't have to have this like crazy knowledge of X-Men to hop into. But again, if you do, then there's more, you're going to get more out of it. You know. So yeah.
And I feel like that's like a pretty common approach to what we see, especially with, what they say is such a long tapestry between not just these characters, like what you get out of Cyclops and Wolverine and stuff like that, but as X-Force or an X-Men as a team and as a fandom itself, there's just a lot that goes into it, and it's kind of intimidating. Would you say the Dawn of X is still like the best point that readers should jump into if they're trying to like make their way into X books?
I think it makes the most sense for right now, like readers right now. I think when you talk to like readers who've been, reading for X amount of time, there's always been these sort of jumping in points, and it feels like whenever someone jumped in is like the best point to jump in. And I think right now it's just been gone through this big resurgence that it's a nice clean place to jump in right now, where it maybe hasn't always been the case then. There was a great jumping in point back in 92 when the Jim Lee Claremont X-Men launched. I guess the Age of Apocalypse was another sort of great jumping in point for some folks. So it all just depends, right? Like I think that every few years is a good jumping in point. I do, the thing I do miss about comics is that it wasn't that we weren't so concerned about it, that you could just kind of jump in. Like I jumped into X-Men in the 80s, right? And like I didn't know what the hell was going on half the time with some of these characters, but the more you read, you figured it out. You get enough information to figure out what's going on, and you get up to speed. But the stories were so engaging that it just kept you going on, and you're like, okay, I don't know what Storm's deal is or whatever, but you figure it out as you go along. So I think any point you want to jump in, but like Dawn of X is so fresh right now that it's easy for people to just go back and read House of X and Powers of X, and then just kind of move on with whichever book they want to follow after that. I don't think it's been a while since we've had two, like, I guess those two stories, which I think were just released as one trade, is a perfect primer for jumping in right now. And you don't have like 20 years to get caught up. You have like 1 year, I think, at this point, or a little over a year. And one of those years is a pandemic year where I think only 4 issues of some of those books came out. So
yeah, it's definitely been kind of chaotic, but even then, like when you're looking at just reading Marvel, there's a ton of X books still happening where you're keeping up with a lot that's going on. I know people that they don't really keep up with the X books that are coming out. They just buy whatever X book they see on the shelf as they see it.
Right.
Like there's not many fandoms in comics where it is so acceptable to just kind of like where you jumped in is a good point, because the tapestry of X-Men goes for so long that it's, there aren't many fandoms that cater the reading experience in such a way where you'll figure it out as you go, and it kind of works with that. Does that influence how you approach books when you take them on, especially in X books?
I don't know, honestly. Like a lot of stuff, for me, it's the continuity stuff normally comes, I don't want to say secondary, because like this other thing I'm working on, I just read through every issue of the previous series, because I like picking up on old threads and sort of, especially the old threads that just got dropped and were never resolved. They give like good starting points. But yeah, I don't know. I think like I don't really think about it too much when I get started, other than like rereading and seeing what's happened before. I just like to think that I want to make it accessible to new readers, give them just enough going in that they need to know who these characters are. Like you always have those whatever. Like I don't want to do origin stories like every Batman movie where you start with Batman's origin, like, or every Spider-Man movie where we see that. Like I think everybody knows that and they can kind of figure that out. I don't think about it too hard. I think about mostly the characters and what they want and what the situation they're dealing with is first, and then I start looking at bringing in some continuity stuff. But I try not to bog myself down too much with it. And then like I'll say that, and then I look back at like Iron Fist, which is like Iron Fist is very much like I took the very first story and like sort of fudged around with some stuff that had happened and expanded on some things that we maybe didn't know had happened since then. So I don't know. I'm talking to my ass.
And I'm not gonna lie, because like Ghost Rider picks up at a very specific point in that mythos in the horror universe, but it does play to that idea that there is enough there on the page where you'll figure the story out, and it's not gonna like hinder your experience in it.
Sure, and with Ghost Rider, it was like Damnation had only come out a year before, where Johnny became the king of Hell, and so it just gave a great starting point. Like he's a king of hell. That's an amazing starting point for a Ghost Rider story. And I love the idea. Like what I was trying to play around with, it was like we've all, I'm sure, worked like day jobs, where management is replaced at one point, and we're like, oh shit, like what's this new manager going to be like? And especially if we like the management, I had it like I worked in health and safety for a long time, and my manager, who I loved, got fired one morning. Like, and I came in, and there was just a brand new person there, and like you're worried about what that person's like. And I like the idea that Johnny's like the brand new manager of hell, and all the people who love the old boss are just giving him shit because like they don't want him there. And he was a guy who didn't earn the promotion. He was like, no, he was a servant in hell before. He doesn't get to be king. So it was just it's a fun starting point. And I think, the Danny stuff, it helped to know that Danny always, they both resent being Ghost Rider, but Danny more than Johnny, resented being Ghost Rider. And it just gave a perfect place to start. And Danny in the old series really showed like addictive tendencies, right? Like he was sort of addicted to being Ghost Rider. So when I started, making him an alcoholic who owns a bar, it just seemed like a good idea. It's a bad idea for him, but it's a good idea for story, right? And it really fits with his personality. So that does come from understanding where the characters came from. But I think and again, it's just not a way that hinders new readers from coming in. It's just all they need to know is Johnny's king of hell and Danny's an alcoholic who owns a bar.
Yeah. Perfect.
So is there any characters that you feel where they're at right now you would love to get your hands on to kind of take their story to the next level?
I have a bucket list of characters who I'd love to write. I think for a lot of writers, Daredevil is sort of on the list of characters you want to do. For me, I think everyone wants to crack at Spider-Man at some point. I grew up reading Spider-Man. I really want to make Speedball cool. I am the right age for when Speedball was launched. Anyone around my age probably remembers. Yeah, do you remember what a big deal Marvel made about launching Speedball? It was a huge thing, and he was supposed to be Marvel's next big superhero. He was supposed to be the next Spider-Man. They had Ditko back to design the character, and he was writing and doing the Speedball issues. And as I was 13 at the time, I think, I bought into it wholesale. I got the issues that Speedball was in. I subscribed to Speedball, and he's not that. Like he's it was an impossible task for him to live up to that. But I always just feel like what if we could just make true on that promise from like 1988? And Speedball is just a character that I like in the same way that I like Lob. I think Speedball is a character who should, in his present day, have a lot of like that generation angst and anxiety about, what he was supposed to be and what he never became. And so I think there's a lot of fun stuff to play around with Speedball in that regard. And he's just like one of those, everyone I think has their favorite like C or D list characters, and for me it's Speedball. So yeah, Speedball. Spider-Man, Daredevil, Speedball. I think it's the same list for everybody, right?
Except probably not Speedball for everybody.
I feel like everyone wants to do a cool Speedball story. But yeah, those are like I tend to prefer to write like one or two character books rather than for some reason I'm on a lot of team books, but my preference is always like if I can do one or two characters. And really just kind of drill down on who those characters are and what's going on with them. That's my preference.
I wanted to appreciate the Uncanny X-Men annual because I just realized I didn't remember that one right now when you said it, and it really struck a point for me, like a really like dense, because it had a lot of information about Cyclops, but like I don't know, I felt like his resurrection was really justified there, and I feel like that's, I don't know. It's good to. I'm personally kind of a Cyclops fan, so it's good to know that I have some great stuff in the recent years about him. Like Marvel Snapshots came out this year, which is also phenomenal. And your annual was up there for the same reason that we've been talking here. Like I feel you get involved emotionally with the characters, and that's great because you kind of they feel like characters, not like pull devices.
Yeah, I think, and in that, it's like there was a lot of father-son stuff in there, which is like, any like sort of father issue stuff is like stuff that I tend to, I've got a daughter, and I had a weird relationship with my own dad when I was growing up. That again, like I feel like half of my comic writing is just me working through my own. It's like my therapy, like, and so that was a lot of that Cyclops. Kid Cable, that X-Men annual, which is just a lot of father-son stuff, and yeah, it was like I said, it was a lot of fun to write. It was frustrating when I was doing the research to try and find these moments and take these weird random moments from Marvel stories in the past and then sort of recontextualize them as this plan that Kid Cable had to bring back Cyclops.
Well, it was a great job.
Thanks.
On my part, I really like appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
And also we got some comments, and one was of appreciation of your New Mutants run by Regina from House of X, which is one of our sister shows. So that's, so someone
Right,
said,
thank you.
I love New Mutants. And
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I don't know if you all want to close with something or like.
I think Michael, which is our here at Comic Watch, has a great one to go out on. Please let one of the books that you want to work on be a Howard the Duck reboot.
Oh yeah, I forgot that one.
Oh man, I don't know if I've got a Howard the Duck story.
We'll have one just tucked away.
It's not Howard. You know what? I've never. That's not true. I've never read any of the old Howard. I've read Chip's Howard the Duck stuff, which was fun. That's not even a character that I honestly had been on my radar to think about. But you know what? Whatever. I'm down with doing challenge. Taking something on that I wouldn't normally, just for the challenge of it. So you guys talk tomorrow. You work it out, and then I'll take it over.
We'll start that campaign. Like, where's the hashtag at?
Yeah.
just get you on a book about Howard the Duck, Glob, and Boom Boom, and just call it a day.
And a Speedball.
And Speedball, yeah, absolutely.
Speedball. The four of them will get into some lucky adventures.
Yes, perfect. I love it. I'm gonna write this down. I'm gonna call my editor as soon as I'm off this call. Like, I got the perfect team for you.
Flawless pitch.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you so much for coming and
Thanks for having me.
with us. And it was great. We had a lot of fun. And I don't know. We hope we have news about your unannounced projects so we can start to read them and all that stuff.
Hopefully in the next few weeks. I don't know. Again, COVID has sort of screwed the schedule. So I know it was supposed to originally come out in February, but obviously it's been pushed because of the schedule. So hopefully soon. It's not an X book though. Sorry.
Okay, so thank you everyone for watching. Hope you have a great weekend. Bye.